You're listening to episode 141, Hannah's Story, Kids with Febrile Seizures. Hello, my friends. This is the first time that we have had a febrile seizure story on the podcast, and I was mentioning to Hannah before we started recording that I know that they're common. I have seen them in the ER, and I'm sure that other parents that we have talked to have had kiddos who have gone through this, but her experience is pretty unique. And, we talk so much about quote unquote what is normal and what is not. And when you're told by a medical team that something is normal and everything in your gut is screaming the opposite, I think Hannah is such an example of that. So we'll walk through both of her daughters who have both had febrile seizures, each one getting more severe. And sometimes at the end of these episodes, you guys, we're able to tie things up with a pretty bow. And sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes you're still a parent who is searching for answers. So I hope that you are able to listen to Hannah's story today, share it to other families that have kids who have had febrile seizures, and just get a lot of relief and support from hearing Hannah and her discussion around febrile seizures. Hannah, I'm so grateful that you were here today, and we will continue to listen to you and hope the best for you and your family. All right, let's get started. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On-Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On-Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners.
I'm Hannah McClooney. I am in the Houston area. I am married and I have two little girls that are 4 years old and 18 months old. And they are just, they're a mess, and I love them, and I love getting to be their mom, and yeah.
That's awesome. You're just right down the road from me. I'm here in Austin. And as soon as you started talking, I heard your little twang, and I was wondering, I was like, okay, which part of Texas is she going to be from?
That's so funny because I feel like I don't have any kind of.
Well, I feel like I don't
Like,
either. And then this past weekend, I was in Florida for a conference, and people were like, Katie, you have such a twang. I'm like, I do? It's hard to hear.
That's funny.
So talk to us a little
Exactly.
bit about kind of the beginning of, we're talking about febrile seizures today. And I was just mentioning to you that we haven't had this specific topic on yet. I've worked in the ER for a long time, and febrile seizures are so common and so scary for parents. And so I know that you have some experiences with your girls going through it. So why don't you walk us through kind of the beginning of what your first experience with febrile seizures was like and what that was like for you as a parent.
Right. So for us, both of my girls have had them. My oldest had hers. She's only had one. And then my youngest has had three. But my oldest, the first time she had one, I did not realize that that's what had happened. I knew that in that evening she had been running a fever, but it was like low grade. It was like 100.8, 101, like maximum. So it wasn't like super alarming to me or anything. But she had never really been sick before. And she's, like I said, 13 months old. I put her down to bed like normal. She went down just fine. But there was just like something felt really off to me. Like my mama instinct and gut was just, something just felt off and uneasy. Um, and we have a video like monitor in her room, so I can see it on the monitor out here. About 30 minutes after I had put her to bed, I look at the monitor and I notice that she's moving, and she has both fists up by her face, and they're balled up fists, and they're just kind of like shaking. And I can kind of hear like a gurgling sound. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is going on? So I hightailed it into her room. And when I got in there, I had noticed that she had vomited everywhere. She was totally blue in the face, and she was not responding to me. And at that point, obviously, I had no idea that it was a seizure that she had had. I got her out of the bed, and I had to like turn her over and do some like hits to her back to try to clear her airway and get the rest of like the vomit out of it. And she was still unresponsive for a while. She was breathing after I had cleared her airway. And so I was like yelling at my husband to call 911. So I had no idea what had happened. And while he was on the phone with them, I was down on the floor with her, just trying to get her to respond and see if I could get her to like come to. Like her eyes were open and she was looking, but like she wouldn't like look at me or like follow me or respond to anything I was saying. So the EMTs got to our house and they checked her out, and they said that she had probably had a seizure. What in the world? Like, she's never had a seizure before. And so we went to the ER in an ambulance, which no parent ever wants to see their kid in that situation. And we got there, and the doctor confirmed that she had probably had a febrile seizure. And at the time, he had said, like, they did like all like the different tests and everything to figure out like if it was anything like bacterial or viral that was like making her sick to cause the fever. The doctor said that it was a stomach virus. That didn't seem right to me, and that there was no possibility that the vomiting was from the seizure, and that it was 100% because of a stomach virus. So a couple days later, we see the rash and bumps on her hands and her feet. Turns out she had hand, foot, and mouth, and that's what it was. And her pediatrician was like, yeah, no, that vomiting was not from a stomach virus. That was definitely from the seizure. That was our first experience. And
I
that was
just like,
terrifying.
I'm hearing you say this, and there's a lot of questions I have for you, but like this one obvious statement where it's so rare that doctors ever say something 100%. And I feel like every time they do, it's wrong. Like they're usually so careful to be like, I can't say for certain, but this is what we think based on blah, blah, blah. But of course, in this case, he's like 100% stomach virus. And you're like, what?
Yeah, there was no way it was related to the seizure. And of course, that was like my first time like going through this. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe it is.
Right, of course. Well, yeah, I want to go back to how did you know what to do when you found her? Like you're in a state of panic, but you had the ability to know how to react. What do you think helped you with that?
I honestly have no idea. I feel like it was just kind of instinct. Um, when your baby's not breathing, what are you gonna do? Like you're gonna like turn them over. And the thing is like I can still feel. I call it like a ghost feeling on my arm, where I can like still feel her body like laying over my arm as I'm like trying to like hit her back and clear her airway. I have no idea what came over me. It was just the first thing that I thought to do.
Yeah. That I bet a lot of parents can relate to that type of feeling that stays with you that just never goes away.
Right. Right.
So when did you have to stay overnight in the hospital, or were you discharged home?
We were in the ER for, I want to say, like 6 hours while they like looked over her and everything, and then they sent us home with like, instructions on like how to treat the fever and all that, since the fever is caused by a sudden spike in temperature.
Okay.
Um, which I had like no idea. I had a nephew who had experienced one before, but I wasn't there to see it. So I was at least familiar with the term.
And when you're discharged home with that stuff, so they tell you how to treat the fever. Do they tell you, like, this is likely to happen again? This is not likely to happen again? What do they tell you?
Yeah. So apparently, with every febrile seizure they have, the more likely they are to have another one until they
Okay.
turn like 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And so that was kind of the thing, like, when she gets a fever, you want to be on the lookout for this because it could happen again.
Mm, okay. That's a lot to like get over. I'm sure, like, putting her to bed and any illness that comes up, it's like you have to relive
Anxiety.
that whole, yeah. Yeah. What do you do to help with that anxiety? How do you help take care of yourself?
Lots of prayer.
Mm,
I mean, that has been like my saving grace, really. And then having a husband who is like really supportive of it. Like, even though she was there, like I was the one that found her. I was the one that was like holding her and taking care of her and all that. So like he knows that it was probably a little bit more traumatic for me. And so for me to have somebody that I can vent to and, cry to was probably one of the biggest helps for me too.
mm. Yeah, it's like that faith and partnership can be those big things that you have to rely on when you're going through it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I know that you had that experience with Hadley, but tell us a little bit about what happened with Madison. And was that a similar situation? Was it different?
So Madison has had three, and they are all completely different from each other, and they're completely different from Hadley, which is also really crazy to me. So her first one, Madison's first one, happened when she was 10 months old. Um, it was just at the beginning of this year. It was the very first week of January, and um, I realized that she was running like a low grade fever. She was probably right around 100.6, 100.7. So it's like barely even considered a fever. Didn't think too much of it, but since we had that experience with Hadley, I still went ahead and I gave her, it was probably Tylenol. Um, and then it was getting close to bedtime. All of these have happened 5 p.m. or later, which is another thing that is interesting to me. They've all happened kind of like in the evening or at night. Um, and I was getting her ready for bed. I had her on the changing table and I was about to change her out of her clothes into her pajamas. And um, she just like stopped, like her eyes glazed over and her hands kind of came back by her head, kind of like what Hadley's did. And um, she kind of convulsed a little bit, but not a whole lot. But I knew that she was out. I could see her eyes rolling around and all that. And so thankfully my husband was home and I hollered for him to come into the room. And he's like, "What's going on?" And I said, "It's a seizure." Like, I immediately knew what it was. And I said, "It's probably another febrile seizure." And he was like, "Okay." And so then, since it was her first one, he immediately called 911 because we hadn't experienced that with her. And I didn't actually see Hadley's seizure. Um, and so hers lasted about 3 minutes that time. which seems like an eternity, but I guess for febrile seizures, like that's a fairly normal time. Like a minute or so is average, but 3 minutes is still not considered like a huge worry. But since it was her first one, we went ahead and called, and so the paramedics came. And of course, Hadley is here too, and she's 3.5 at this point. She's like, "What's going on?" And she's scared. She sees all the commotion. She sees the EMTs coming in and all that. And we take her to the hospital, and they did all the tests, and they could not find anything actually wrong with her. That she just had a fever. She was acting normal, other than a slight fever. Even in like the following days, like she didn't have any sniffles. Like there was nothing that seemed like it would cause an illness for her. Like she seemed totally fine. And so we came home, and I alternated like Tylenol and ibuprofen the way that the doctors told us to, just until her fever was more under control. So that was her first one.
What were they like? What were your kiddos like after the seizure was over? Were they sleepy? Did
Like
they kind of come back? Yeah, coming out of it.
Very loopy. Like it took them, every time has taken like a different amount of time. But they just seem very groggy, kind of like they're coming out of like an anesthesia.
Okay.
Very groggy. Madison got super fussy too.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're confused, like what just
Right.
happened.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how did Madison's second seizure come about? Was it with the same illness that you couldn't identify was an illness, or was it at a different time?
This one, the next one happened, let's see, that was January. This one happened at the beginning of March, so 2 months later. Not even 2 months later. I had zero idea she was running a fever. In fact, I don't think she was until it happened, because I was still breastfeeding her at that point, and I had just gotten done feeding her, so she was, up against my body, and she did not feel warm to me at all. And by that point, I was super aware of body temperature. Just
Right. You're like, you can spot a temperature from a mile away.
Yes, yes. So, and she was running around and giggling and playing with her sister and all that kind of stuff. Seemed totally normal. But I was in our kitchen, and I was unloading our dishwasher, and she had like toddled over, and was like standing up by the dishwasher, and all of a sudden she just like kind of slowly collapsed back. It was weird because it was like she was catching herself falling backwards, but she was not like conscious. And this one's hard. So my husband was not home. It was just me and Hadley and Madison, and Hadley could hear everything that was going on. She saw everything. So after about 3 minutes of her seizing, which looked the same as the first one, after about 3 minutes of it, I decided that I would go ahead and call 911, since I was there by myself. And I got like a very quick text out to my husband saying like, 911, Madison, get home. That was all I could get out real quick.
Yeah.
Well, once we hit about the 4 or 5 minute mark of her seizing, she had completely stopped breathing. Her face was blue. She had foam coming out of her mouth. And at that point, like, I knew that we had kind of like crossed the threshold into something that was potentially more serious. And so um, I was talking to the 911 dispatcher, and I told her, okay, she's not breathing anymore. Her chest is not rising. There's nothing coming out of her mouth or her nose as far as breath goes. And she's like, okay, I need you to start compressions, and this is what I want you to do. We're going to do CPR. Thankfully, so at the time, I was a high school teacher, and one of my really close colleagues that I worked with at the time, she had our campus nurse in her classroom certifying her students because she taught like a child development class. And so her students get certified in CPR, particularly infant CPR. And I walked in there literally the week before this happened. And I got a refresher course in infant CPR because I was certified in high school, but it had been, 12, 13 years since then.
Right.
And so I got that like refresher course literally the week before I needed to use it on my baby.
Oh my gosh.
It took about a minute and a half of me doing CPR, and then she finally kind of like coughed back into my mouth when I was giving her a breath. And so I knew she was breathing again at that point. And as soon as she started breathing is when the EMTs arrived. And I had to send my little 3.5-year-old Hadley to go open up the front door and let them in. Like, she had to unlock it and everything. But she did not leave Madison's side, like, throughout this whole thing. She was sitting there next to her, like, stroking her hair, like, begging her to wake up and to start breathing. And it broke my heart in a million different ways.
Yeah.
So once I got there, she had a very, very weak pulse. And so they were having to monitor that. Thankfully, my husband was only 5 minutes up the road. He's in sales, and so he was at a customer that was close to our house. And he was able to come home like really quickly, and he got there at the same time the EMTs did, and so he was able to handle Hadley, who was panicking and traumatized by this point. And we were able to tend to her, went to the hospital, did the whole thing again. And this time she had worked herself up so much in the hospital once we finally got there. I think she was so out of it and so confused, and she worked herself up so much that she just like vomited all over me. They were trying to do like chest x-rays and stuff because I had to do compressions, and that can, bruise or fracture ribs. And thankfully she was okay with that. And then they came back and said that she had a UTI and an ear infection and pharyngitis. So she kind of got hit with everything, and I literally had no idea because she was acting totally normal, her normal, happy, bubbly self.
Hannah, it's so much. It's like, even though it was the third time, it's just, I can imagine, just so crazy to relive that, to re-talk about that. And it must be so difficult to have to picture that. And like you said, the dynamic between your daughters, right? And then all of that. That's a lot.
Yeah. It took a lot of talking through with Hadley afterwards, because every time we tried to go to the hospital with Madison, because of all the COVID restrictions and everything, like, we couldn't bring her. At first we were told that only one parent could be in the ER, and we were like, no, we're both coming in. It was hard for her because, like, one of our parents, thankfully both sets of her grandparents was really close to us, but she's had to go with them during those times, and she didn't really fully understand like what was going on. So
Right.
it took a lot of like talking her through things and trying to help her process like what she had seen too.
Yeah, and it may be one of those things too where it's like that ongoing conversation. And as she gets older and remembers now in a different way or continues to have conversations and different thoughts about what had happened, it may come up again, I would guess.
Mhm. Oh yeah, and it does. Like even now, like if Madison just is like zoning out and staring off into space, Heather's like, "Mom, she stopped." That's what she calls like a seizure. She stopped. I'm like, she's not stopped. She's just doing something.
Yeah.
But she's okay.
Yeah. We'll be right back. A perfect example of this is one of my good friends was in the hospital with her son, and I didn't want to bother her, but I wanted her to know that I was thinking about her. And easily you can just push Caring Band, go to your select messages, and push it, and it gets a vibration right to her wrist. I just love this. I love it for kiddos who are hospitalized and especially for those siblings who are at home. How great would it be for both kids to have a caring band and they can send loving messages back and forth? I love this for moms who are in antepartum, right? And they haven't given birth yet, but maybe they have to be hospitalized for a long time and they can send like little pulse vibrations to their kids at home or vice versa. Anyway, I just love this product and wanted to share it with you. If you go to childlifeoncall.com/caringband and you use code CLOC22, you get 20% off any caring band, which is just $32. Okay, I'm going to end my rant now, but I really do love caring band. Oh my goodness.
That was
Okay,
our
I'm a little scared to hear about the next one.
uh so the third one happened at the very end of June of this year. So it was about 3 months later. Um, so they're happening between like 2 and 3 months apart. So now I'm like, right now I'm keeping my fingers crossed because we're at that point right now for the next
Yeah.
one. Uh,
And how old is she
so
now?
uh, she is 18 months now.
18 months. Okay.
Yeah. So this one happened when she was like 16, I believe. And um, this time I had been playing on the floor with her for a while, and I thought she was kind of starting to feel just a little bit warm, um, but it wasn't like too concerning for me. And like I had like told myself, okay, the next time I get up, I'm gonna go get her the Tylenol, which, hindsight, I should have done immediately. Not that that guarantees that they're not going to seize, but I knew that she was feeling a little bit warm, and uh, I had like handed her a toy, and she took the toy from me and then immediately dropped it and just stood there for a second and then sat down very like firmly on her butt and then fell back. And it's kind of like the one that was right before this, where she kind of like touches herself in slow motion, like falling down. This one, her whole body tensed up a lot more than with the other two times. Um, like there was like almost no moving her limbs, like if you tried. She was that tense. And um, again, I think everybody was home. So my husband and Hadley were both home, and I let her speak for about 4 or 5 minutes, and my husband was timing everything once we hit 4 minutes, because that's what the ER had told us after that second seizure. They were like, okay, if she's seizing for like 1 or 2 minutes, like it's not like a huge deal, get her to come out of it. But if she hits 4 minutes or more, then that's when you need to go ahead and then call it in. So I did, or she did, while I was like trying to get her to wake up. She seized for about 8 minutes before she came to, and so by the time she woke up, the EMTs were here, and they were checking her out. Um, and so I knew since she had seized for so long, this meant another trip to the ER. So I went into my room real quick to go get dressed so that we could go. And in like the 2 minutes I was in my room, she hadn't totally come out of the seizure, and she went back into another seizure. And that one lasted for about 4 minutes. She barely woke up and then went down again, and she seized for a total of 20 minutes in a time period of about 24 minutes.
Oh
Which
my
was
gosh.
insane. They had to get for her. I cannot remember. It was some sort of benzo that they had to give her like in her nose, to get her to stop seizing, because seizing for 20 minutes is obviously not good. And so that was what was concerning about that. She was breathing the entire time. She never turned blue this time. She didn't foam at the mouth this time. But the fact that it lasted so long was what was so concerning.
Right.
And so again, there we go to the hospital. Hadley is freaking out because her sister stopped again, and they did all the tests again. Nothing came back positive. So just like the first time, we had no idea what was wrong. We had no diagnosis.
I'm just trying to picture what that was like for you. Just so frustrating and so scary
Yeah.
all at the same time. It's like
Hmm.
you're probably like, when are we going to get a break and get some
Yeah.
answers? So, can you describe to me, like, when she's seizing and you're there and they give you instructions to try to get her out of it? Are you just like calling her name and saying, "Wake up, we're here, you're safe"?
Hmm. Yeah. It's putting her on a like firm surface. So ideally on like a carpeted floor.
Yeah.
Um, so not on like tile or anything that could be more painful. So I lay her down there. Um, and I'm just like there, kind of like talking her through it, trying to get her to wake up, know that I'm here. Because I've talked to people who have had seizures as like, teenagers or adults, and they have told me how painful it is because your muscles are so tight and so tense, how painful it is. And then the next day they're so sore from it. So I'm like, I can't imagine that, like even more so with a baby.
Right.
So just trying to be whatever peace I can be for her.
Mm-hmm. Did they have you stay overnight this time in the ER, or did they just call it another febrile seizure and send you home?
Yeah, so they ruled it as a febrile seizure, obviously. They wanted to do more blood work because the other two times in the ER, they really only did like urine samples and stuff. I don't think they did blood work at all the other two times now that I think about it. Um, but they did like, flu, strep, COVID test, all that kind of stuff, and urine
Yeah.
test. Um, and this time they wanted to draw blood, and that was a total nightmare in and of itself. It took them 20 minutes digging around a needle in her, and that put me beside myself.
I'm sure.
Um,
I know. Like, she's agitated, you're traumatized and exhausted. This whole blood draw process is really difficult. Yeah.
yes, it was
Ugh.
it was bad. So the doctor that was on her case that night recommended that we go see this neurologist that was in the area, the pediatric neurologist, because she was telling me, while febrile seizures are pretty common, um, having three within 6 months is a lot.
Yeah.
And, uh, like it's just more and more likely to happen. And the more it happens, the more likely they are to develop a seizure disorder. And she was like, I would feel comfortable with her seeing a pediatric neurologist to see if there is anything else that like we may be missing neurologically. And so I made an appointment. We got in the next week. And he observed her, got all the information on like how her seizures had been and all that. And he's like, I really don't see anything out of the ordinary. And I'm like, okay, cool. That really doesn't help. And then I kind of started like piecing things together that she has fevers like every 3 weeks with no other symptoms. Sometimes they result in a seizure and sometimes they don't. And so like I brought it up to her pediatrician and I was like, this just doesn't seem right to me. Could there be something else going on? And so then she directed me to an infectious disease doctor to run some tests, talk to him, see what he says about anything that was like autoimmune related or just like anything else that we may have been missing. We did all those tests and everything that he said to do. And again, everything came back. She was perfectly fine and healthy, even when she's running a fever. And I'm like, okay. So they were trying to diagnose her with a fever syndrome. But because her blood work came back not showing that, then they're like, well, maybe it's not. So we're still kind of stuck in limbo. We ended up going back to the pediatric neurologist because ID doctor sent us that way to do an EEG. And of course, the EEG came back perfectly normal too. So.
Wow. Okay. I was glad you got that EEG. And that the ID doctor sent you back there. But I know it's frustrating to get like these reports that everything is fine and you're like, everything is not fine. My daughter's had 3 seizures in the past 6 months. Yeah, that's really difficult. Have you met any other parents who you've been able to like kind of chat and brainstorm with?
Yeah, so actually one of my friends, I didn't know that she had experienced it with one of her boys. And she was told the same thing, like, this is normal until they're 5 or 6 years old, even though she's had 2 seizures within 4 months. And, you know, it's terrifying. And I'm just like thinking to myself, how is this considered normal when it is so terrifying for the kid and for the parent? Like, it's,
yeah,
I don't know.
Have they given you any kind of follow-up to do now? Like, you know, it seems like the plan is of course to call 911 when it hits that certain 4-minute mark. But what else have they, you know, suggested that you do?
So they said, just be very diligent with giving a fever reducer if she starts to go, even if she hits like 99.4. They say that like instead of that like 100.4, that is like typically your fever. When she hits 99.4, give her a fever reducer. And I'm like, well, shoot, we may be doing this all the time. But the neurologist did prescribe an emergency medication to stop a seizure if she was having it. So we have 2 doses of it. And apparently the dosage that she needs, because she's tiny for 18 months old, but she's in like the 5th percentile. She's little. And that dosage is apparently really hard to find. I had to wait 3 weeks for it, which kept me on pins and needles because I'm like praying that I don't need it in that time frame. But if she does have another seizure, then once we hit that fever or that 4-minute mark, then we would administer it to her to get her to stop the seizure.
How is Hadley, I guess, or how is Madison after kind of coming out of the agitation, getting back to normal life? Is she returning to her normal development, playing with you, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, once the fever passes, and we have that under control, and it's usually at least 24 hours after the seizure because I think she is just sore from it. After that, she's totally herself.
Mm.
Um,
I bet that feels
that's
good to
why like
see.
it does. That's why the neurologist wasn't like super concerned because she's like, look at her, she's running around and she's playing and she's laughing and like all these things. And I'm like, well, that is a positive that she is, returning to her normal self, you know, once it all wears off.
Yeah, it's still like you have to hold your breath all the time, and it's making me think of like this whole like teaching kids to wash their hands, take care of other people by, you know, getting all of these things that you can do to help reduce the spread of disease and germs. And I think about families like yours who absolutely need that extra support and that extra bubble of people being careful around your kids when they're sick.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm very like with her, and I wasn't like that before. I was like, kids need to be exposed to, develop their immunity. But now I'm like, well, if it's going to cause her to have another fever that sends her into a seizure, like, please don't.
I would be the
And I've
same way.
had
Yeah.
I've had to train like anybody who watches them. Like I stay home with them now. Like I stopped teaching um, this past year. So this is my first school year home with them. Um, so I'm with them now, but like I have had to like train her um, grandparent who may watch her, like if we want to like go out on a date or whatever. Any kind of babysitter I have to do that with. The church nursery I had to tell them, and I always have to have her emergency medication on hand just in case we need it. So that stays in the diaper bag now.
Hmm. It's a lot of parents describe it as like that weight that just like you carry around. You don't ever get to take it off, and you just have to learn how to live with it now.
Yeah, especially since it can sneak up on you. Like her second seizure, I had no idea because it's the thing with like these seizures. It's not how high the temperature gets; it's how fast it gets there. And so when they spike, and when they go from 98.6 or whatever to 102, in 2 minutes,
Yeah,
like their bodies can't handle it. So
right.
I mean, you really never know when it can happen.
What are some of the things you've learned about yourself, having had to go through these experiences?
Um, I don't know. I think after the first one with Hadley and like seeing how like panicked I was then, my husband would tell me like, it's a good thing I was home because I don't know that you're good in emergency situations. I was like, well, that's not good. But as they've happened more, not that it's necessarily a good thing, um, I'm much more calm because I have, like researched them and like what do I need to do, what shouldn't I do. So I think just being like more aware and knowing how to handle things has just made me like more calm. So like when we have like other issues come up or like other sicknesses or whatever, it's definitely made me a lot more calm in that sense too.
It's almost like you have this superpower. Like you can tell your body and your mind in those moments of crisis, like, I've got a job to do. I have a plan. I know how to execute it. Like, I've researched this. I can do it. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
Even from the very beginning, I
right.
would say, even with Hadley's first one, like you knew what to do. Um, that mom instinct. I think you're pretty amazing.
Oh, thank you. I think I've had to, so since after Madison's first one, so that's two for us total, um, I kind of started becoming more vocal about it because the hospitals kept telling me like, "Oh, this is so normal," and I'm like, "Who else has had these? Like, I haven't heard of like other people like really like struggling with this or having them." And so I started talking out on like my Instagram more about it, because I'm like, did y'all know this is a thing? Because I did not know that this was a thing. And then I had kind of gotten like attacked by other parents, and they were like, oh my gosh, fevers happen, like calm down, like this is a normal childhood thing. And I'm like, excuse me, have you seen your child not breathing because they had a fever that resulted in a seizure?
Oh man.
If you have not, don't talk to me.
The people who get so brave on Instagram. I mean, Lindsay and I found you because of how you're speaking out, and I know many other parents are going to find it not only extremely validating, but very comforting to hear what you've said today. So I'm just really thankful that you came on and did this with us. And if people want to follow along with you, how can they do that?
So my Instagram is the THE _Mrs. MRS _ McSweeney. It's MCCLUNEY. That's really where I talk the most about it.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure to link to you in the show notes page, and I'm just so grateful for you speaking out about this, because it is scary and what you are going through is a lot. And so I know that talking about it, being heard and sharing your own experiences is important. So I'm very grateful for you.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Thank you for listening to the Child Life On Call podcast. I'm your host, Katie Taylor, and you can follow us at Child Life On Call on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please rate and review to make it easier for other families to find us. We have cute merch available at www.bonfire.com/store/childlifeoncall, and you can listen to more episodes and find resources at childlifepodcast.com.